An arrogant tycoon awaits the call of a foreign investor who could save his bankrupt empire. While he is away, the maid's daughter answers the phone and realizes the man is plotting a scam. The girl's warning is treated as insubordination until her words prevent a billion-dollar fraud. What the millionaire discovers is astonishing. Chapter 1. The Empire and the Child. The Manhattan skyline stretched like a steel and glass monument to Robert Thornton's ambition. From the 87th floor of Thornton Tower, the city seemed to bow before him, though today he barely noticed the view that had once filled him with pride. The empire he had built over 3 decades was crumbling beneath his Italian leather shoes. Robert, Bobby to the handful of people who'd known him before his billions, paced his corner office, phone pressed to his ear. The familiar sensation of control slipped through his fingers like sand. The shares dropped another 8% this morning, his CFO explained, voice tight with tension. The board is meeting tomorrow. They're talking about a vote of no confidence, Bobby. Tell them to hold their damn horses, Robert growled. Hemsworth's wire transfer will clear by end of business Friday. This whole liquidity crisis will be ancient history. The CFO paused. Are you sure about this, Hemsworth? Guy, nobody seems to know much about him. Edward Hemsworth represents the Zurich Group. They've got deeper pockets than God, Robert snapped, glancing at his watch, an antique Patek Philippe that had once belonged to his father. I've vetted him personally. Westfield brought him in. If you say so, I say so. Robert ended the call with a decisive tap and turned back to the sprawling windows. The April rain pelted against the glass, mirroring his mood. A soft knock interrupted his thoughts. What? He barked. The door opened timidly, revealing Eleanor, his executive assistant. Her expression suggested she was delivering news she knew would displease him. Mr. Thornton, there's been a situation with the cleaning staff. Maria Ramirez needs to bring her daughter to work today. The girls' school is closed for teacher training, and her regular sitter cancelled last minute. Robert's jaw tightened. And this concerns me because company policy requires executive approval for minors on the premises, and because the girl will need to be on this floor while Maria works. HR said to check with you directly. Absolutely not, Robert said flatly. This isn't a daycare center, it's the headquarters of a Fortune 500 company. Elena shifted uncomfortably. Maria has been with us for 7 years, sir. Never missed a day. HR suggested we make an exception just this once. Robert pinched the bridge of his nose. Personnel issues were the last thing he needed today. How old is the kid? 8. And she can't stay downstairs with security? They're understaffed today with the quarterly security audit. Robert sighed deeply. Fine, tell Ms. Ramirez her daughter can stay, but she needs to be quiet and out of the way. I have the most important call of my career coming in at 3, and I don't need distractions. Yes, sir, thank you. Eleanor turned to leave. And Elena? Sir? Make sure everyone knows this isn't setting a precedent. When the door closed, Robert loosened his tie slightly and returned to his desk. The Thornton Enterprises quarterly report glared back at him from his monitor. 5 consecutive quarters of losses, asset devaluation, debt restructuring proposals. The business press had started calling him the falling titan. Only Edward Hemsworth's promised infusion of $300 million stood between him and corporate extinction. The Zurich Group's letter of intent sat in his top drawer like a talisman. Thomas Westfield, his trusted legal counsel for 15 years, had orchestrated the introduction. A perfect match, Westfield had called it. They need American market access, you need liquidity. The afternoon crawled by in a haze of crisis management calls and emergency meetings. By 2:30, Robert's throat was raw from barking orders and his temples throbbed. He stepped out of his office, heading for the executive bathroom to splash cold water on his face before the Hemsworth call. That's when he first saw her. A small figure sat cross-legged on the floor near his assistant's desk, surrounded by colored pencils and paper. Dark hair fell in neat braids on either side of a serious face. The girl looked up as he approached, studying him with startling intensity. You must be Ms. Ramirez's daughter, Robert said stiffly. The child nodded. I'm Sophia. You're Mr. Thornton. Your picture is in the lobby. Yes, well, he cleared his throat. What are you drawing? Sophia held up her paper. It was a surprisingly detailed sketch of the Manhattan skyline, with Thornton Tower prominently in the center. You have a good eye, Robert admitted, genuinely impressed. My mum says I notice things other people don't, Sophia replied with a shrug. Eleanor approached with a stack of documents. Mr. Thornton, these need your signature before the Hemsworth call. And Jack Donovan from security called. He'll be up in 10 minutes with the updated protocols. Robert nodded and turned back to his office, but not before noticing Sophia's head tilt slightly at the mention of Hemsworth's name. Something in her expression changed, a flicker of recognition. Inside his office, Robert signed the documents mechanically, his mind already rehearsing his pitch to Hemsworth. The Zurich group wanted a 30% stake in exchange for their capital. Under normal circumstances, he would never consider diluting his control so dramatically, but these were desperate times. At exactly 2:55, Jack Donovan knocked and entered. The ex-military security chief had been with Thornton Enterprises for a decade, one of the few people Robert actually trusted. The security upgrades are complete, Mr. Thornton, Jack reported. I've also assigned additional personnel to monitor the banking systems during the transfer window tomorrow. Good, Robert said. I want this transaction locked down tight. If word leaks about our cash position before Hemsworth's money hits, we're finished. Jack hesitated. Sir, my team did some routine background on Hemsworth and the Zurich group. There are some inconsistencies we'd like to... Robert cut him off with a wave. Westfield's people have vetted them thoroughly. Your concerns are noted, but this deal is happening. Jack's expression remained professionally neutral, but his disapproval was evident. Understood, sir. As Jack left, Robert glanced at his watch. 3 minutes until the call. He straightened his tie, cleared his throat, and mentally switched into the persona that had intimidated boardrooms across the country. Confident, uncompromising, in complete control. His private line rang precisely at 3 o'clock. Thornton, he answered. Elena burst through the door without knocking, her face pale. Mr. Thornton, I'm so sorry to interrupt, but there's an emergency board call on line 2. They're saying the SEC has questions about the Westfield disclosure filings. Robert felt his blood pressure spike. Tell them I'll call back in 30 minutes. They said it's urgent. The trading floor is hearing rumors. He swore under his breath. Hemsworth's on the other line. I need to take this call. Sir, Elena began, but the intercom buzzed. Robert held up a finger to silence her and pressed the speaker button. Hemsworth, I apologize for the delay. We have a minor situation. Silence. Hemsworth? More silence, then a small voice. Mr. Thornton? It's Sophia. Robert froze. What? Why are you answering my phone? Your assistant had to run to the copy room, the girl said. The phone was ringing with Mr. Hemsworth's name, and I remembered what I heard yesterday. What you heard? Robert's voice dropped dangerously. Put Hemsworth back on immediately. I hung up, Sophia said simply. He's not a real investor. He's going to do to you what happened to Mr. Jenkins at the scrapyard near our apartment. Robert's face darkened with fury. Do you have any idea what you've done? His voice rose to a thunderous pitch that had made countless executives tremble. Get your mother in here now. But Sophia didn't flinch. Her dark eyes met his without fear. Mr. Jenkins lost everything, she continued calmly. The man promised to save his business, but Mr. Jenkins had to send money first as a guarantee. My mum said it was a trick called an advance fee fraud. For a moment, Robert could only stare at the child. The sheer audacity of her actions left him speechless. Then his anger reasserted itself. You've potentially destroyed a $300 million deal based on some coincidence, he snarled. Where is your mother? As if summoned by his rage, Maria Ramirez appeared in the doorway, still holding cleaning supplies. Her face drained of color when she saw her daughter facing the notorious CEO. Mr. Thornton, I'm so sorry, she began, her accent thickening with anxiety. Sophia, what have you done? Robert turned his glare to Maria. Your daughter has just interfered with the most important business call of my career. Both of you need to leave the building, immediately. You're fired. Maria's eyes widened in panic. "Please, Mr. Thornton, I need this job. My daughter didn't mean—" "I did mean it," Sophia interrupted, her small voice somehow cutting through the tension. "Mom, it's exactly like what happened to Mr. Jenkins. The same words, the same guarantee payment, even the same accent." Chapter 2. The Unexpected Savior. The silence that followed Sophia's declaration hung heavy in the air. Robert's expression shifted from fury to uncertainty, the first cracks appearing in his formidable composure. "What exactly do you mean, the same words?" he asked, his voice lower but still tense. Maria put a protective hand on Sophia's shoulder. "Mr. Thornton, please, she's just a child. She doesn't understand business matters." "Let her speak," Robert demanded, his eyes never leaving Sophia's face. Sophia squared her small shoulders. "Yesterday I was waiting for Mom after school. She was cleaning the conference room on the 85th floor, and I sat in the hallway with my books. Two men were talking inside. One had a funny accent, like in those British spy movies. He was telling the other man that your company needed the guarantee transfer before the full investment could proceed." Robert's brow furrowed. "That's standard procedure in—" "Then," Sophia continued, undeterred, "he said something about offshore accounts being untraceable once the shell game begins. That's exactly what the man told Mr. Jenkins before his scrapyard closed." Robert's eyes narrowed. "How would you know what happened to this Mr. Jenkins?" "He's our neighbor," Maria explained quietly. "Raphael Jenkins. His scrapyard was 3 blocks from our apartment in Queens. 6 months ago, a foreign investor promised to save his business, but first Mr. Jenkins had to wire a security deposit to show good faith. He lost everything." Robert turned away, pacing toward the window. Outside, the rain had intensified, sheets of water cascading down the glass. His reflection looked haggard, uncertain. "Get Jack Donovan back in here," he ordered Elena, who had returned and was hovering anxiously in the doorway. "Now." While they waited, Robert studied Sophia, who had returned to her drawing as if nothing extraordinary had happened. The girl's composure was remarkable. Maria stood nearby, nervously twisting a cleaning cloth in her hands. Jack arrived within minutes, his expression alert. "You needed me, sir." "Tell me about those inconsistencies in Hemsworth's background," Robert said without preamble. Jack glanced at Maria and Sophia, then back to Robert. "Sir, perhaps we should discuss this privately." "They stay," Robert said firmly. "What did you find?" Jack straightened. "The Zurich Group's corporate registration is less than 6 months old. Their listed headquarters is a virtual office. Their claimed assets can't be independently verified. And Hemsworth himself has no digital footprint before last year." Robert absorbed this information in silence. Then, "And you tried to tell me this earlier." "Yes, sir. But I dismissed you." "You did, sir." Robert turned to Sophia. "This conversation you overheard, who was Hemsworth speaking with?" Sophia thought for a moment. "I didn't see the other person, but the British man called him counselor several times." A cold weight settled in Robert's stomach. Westfield, his trusted legal counsel, had brought Hemsworth into his orbit, had vouched for the Zurich Group's legitimacy. "Jack, I need you to do 3 things," Robert said, his business instincts kicking back in. "First, contact our bank and freeze all outgoing wire transfers effective immediately. Second, get me everything you can on a scrapyard in Queens owned by Raphael Jenkins, specifically any fraud complaints he filed. Third, I want complete surveillance on Thomas Westfield's communications, discreetly." "On our legal counsel?" Jack confirmed, his expression carefully neutral. "Yes," Robert said grimly. "And one more thing. Ms. Ramirez and her daughter are under Thornton Enterprises protection as of now. I want security personnel assigned to them immediately." Maria's eyes widened. "Mr. Thornton, what's happening?" Robert looked at her directly. "Possibly nothing, possibly something very serious. Either way, your daughter may have just saved my company from disaster, and I take care of people who help me." He turned to Jack. "Make it happen. I need preliminary findings within the hour." As Jack left, Robert returned to his desk and pressed the intercom. "Eleanor, reschedule the board call. Tell them I'm handling a security matter related to the financing deal. Then get Westfield on the line. Sir, Elena responded. Mr. Westfield called while you were talking with security. He said he's been trying to reach you urgently about the Hemsworth situation. Robert's jaw tightened. I bet he has. Tell him I'll call back shortly. When Elena left, Robert turned to Maria. Ms. Ramirez, I apologize for my reaction earlier. I was hasty. Maria nodded cautiously. It's all right, Mr. Thornton. We should go back to work now. Actually, Robert said, I'd like you both to stay here for the moment. I may need to ask your daughter more questions. Sophia looked up from her drawing. Are you going to catch the bad men like in the movies? Despite everything, Robert found himself fighting a smile. Business isn't usually that dramatic, but yes, if someone is trying to defraud my company, they will face consequences. The next hour passed in a blur of activity. Robert worked the phones relentlessly, while Maria and Sophia waited in a corner of his spacious office. Security reports began filtering in, each one confirming his worst fears. The Zurich Group was indeed a shell company. Hemsworth's credentials were fabricated, and most damning of all, Thomas Westfield had received 3 large deposits to an offshore account in the past month. Jack returned with a grim expression. Sir, we've confirmed that Raphael Jenkins filed a police report about an advance fee fraud 6 months ago. The case is still open. The investigating officer mentioned similar cases targeting distressed businesses across the Northeast. Robert nodded, processing this information. And the wire transfer? Frozen, sir. But there's something else. Jack hesitated. Westfield knows something's wrong. He's made 12 calls in the past 30 minutes, including 3 to Hemsworth and 2 to a burner phone we can't trace. Robert's expression hardened. Have security detain Westfield if he tries to leave the building. Already done, sir. Just then, Robert's private line rang again. The caller ID showed Hemsworth's number. Robert glanced at Sophia, who was watching him intently, then at Jack, who nodded. Speakerphone, Robert mouthed, then answered. Thornton. Bobby, old chap. Hemsworth's cultured British accent filled the room. Bit of a technical glitch earlier? Your line dropped rather suddenly. No glitch, Robert replied coolly. I've been reviewing some concerning information about the Zurich Group. A brief pause. Oh? What sort of concerns? Let's start with the fact that your company doesn't exist, Edward, if that's even your name. The silence stretched for several seconds. I'm afraid there's been some misunderstanding, Hemsworth finally said, his tone still smooth but with an undercurrent of tension. The Zurich Group operates through several subsidiaries for tax purposes. Perhaps your people are looking in the wrong places. Or perhaps, Robert countered, you're running the same scam you pulled on Raphael Jenkins and his scrapyard in Queens. Another longer silence. When Hemsworth spoke again, his voice had lost its polished edge. You're making a serious mistake, Thornton. The transfer window closes tomorrow. Without our capital, your company won't survive the quarter. I'll take my chances, Robert said flatly. Don't call this number again. He ended the call and looked up to find Maria staring at him, her face pale. Mr. Thornton, she said quietly, those men, they can be dangerous. When Mr. Jenkins threatened to go to the police, someone broke into his apartment. Robert frowned. Jack, increase the security detail for Ms. Ramirez and her daughter. I want round-the-clock protection. Jack nodded and stepped out to make the arrangements. Left alone with Maria and Sophia, Robert found himself at an unusual loss for words. For decades, he had cultivated an image of infallibility. His employees feared him. His business rivals respected and envied him. Yet here he stood, potentially saved from financial ruin by an 8-year-old girl. Thank you, he said finally, the words feeling strange on his tongue. Both of you. Maria smiled tentatively. Sophia has always been observant, sometimes too much for her own good. Sophia looked up from her drawing. Are you still going to fire my mom? Robert actually laughed, a sound rarely heard in the executive suite of Thornton Tower. No, Sophia. In fact, I think your mother deserves a promotion. The moment of levity was short-lived. Jack burst back into the office, his expression grim. Sir, we have a situation. Westfield managed to slip past security. He's gone. Robert swore under his breath. Find him. Use whatever resources you need. There's more, Jack said, his voice dropping. Hemsworth's number just called Maria's personal cell phone, left a voicemail. Maria gasped, instinctively pulling Sophia closer. What did it say? Robert demanded. Jack's expression darkened further. The message said, "Curious children often get hurt. Keep your daughter away from things that don't concern her." The blood drained from Maria's face. Sophia looked confused, but sensed the adult's tension. Robert's expression transformed, a cold fury replacing his earlier uncertainty. In that moment, he made a decision that would alter the course of his life and the lives of everyone in the room. "Jack, I want Maria and Sophia moved to the company guest apartment in the tower immediately. Full security detail, no exceptions. Then I want everything we have on Hemsworth, Westfield, and this entire operation. Bank records, communications, associates, everything." He turned to Maria, his voice softening slightly. "I promise you, Ms. Ramirez, no one will harm your daughter. Thornton Enterprises protects its own." And for the first time in years, Robert truly meant every word he said. Chapter 3. Shadows and Allies. The guest apartment on the 90th floor of Thornton Tower was a stark contrast to Maria and Sophia's modest Queen's walk-up. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered panoramic views of the city, luxurious furnishings adorned every room, and the kitchen was stocked with gourmet foods neither of them had ever tasted, but the opulence couldn't mask the fear that had settled over them. "Try to get some sleep," Maria told Sophia as she tucked her into the king-sized bed in the guest bedroom. "Everything will be okay." Sophia studied her mother's face with those perceptive eyes. "You're scared," she stated simply. Maria brushed a strand of hair from her daughter's forehead. "A little. But Mr. Thornton has good people watching over us." Indeed, 2 security personnel were stationed outside their door, and Jack Donovan had personally swept the apartment for surveillance devices before leaving them for the night. Across the building, in his own penthouse suite, Robert Thornton sat in his home office surrounded by files and digital reports. The comfortable furniture and personal touches did little to soften the intensity of his focus. He hadn't slept in 36 hours, running, on black coffee and determination. The intercom buzzed. "Mr. Thornton, Jack Donovan is here," announced his residential security officer. "Send him in," Robert replied, not looking up from the financial records spread across his desk. Jack entered, carrying a leather portfolio and looking as fresh as ever despite the late hour. Military discipline, Robert supposed. "What did you find?" Robert asked without preamble. Jack placed several photographs on the desk. "We've identified Edward Hemsworth. His real name is Julian Mercer, a British national with fraud investigations pending in 3 countries. He specializes in what law enforcement calls corporate confidence schemes, targeting businesses in financial distress, gaining insider information, then extracting advance fees before disappearing." Robert examined the photos. They showed a well-dressed man with salt and pepper hair, the face of Edward Hemsworth, or rather Julian Mercer, meeting with various individuals, including Thomas Westfield. "And Westfield?" Robert asked, his voice tight with barely controlled anger. The betrayal by his longtime legal counsel cut deeper than he cared to admit. "Still in the wind," Jack replied, "but we've tracked his movements over the past 3 months. He's had at least 6 meetings, with Mercer and several more with this man." Jack placed another photo on the desk. "We don't have a name yet, but he appears to be the coordinator. Mercer reports to him." Robert studied the image of a distinguished-looking man in his 60s, impeccably dressed, with silver hair and the confident bearing of someone accustomed to power. Something about him seemed vaguely familiar, though Robert couldn't place it. "What about the threat to Sophia?" Robert asked. Jack's expression darkened. "We've traced the call to another burner phone already discarded, but the voice analysis confirms it wasn't Mercer or Westfield. Our security team believes it came from someone higher up the chain." "The silver-haired man?" "Possibly. Whoever he is, he has resources and connections. This isn't just a simple fraud operation, Mr. Thornton. It's sophisticated, targeted, and well-organized." Robert leaned back in his chair, considering this information. "Have you spoken with Jenkins, the scrapyard owner?" "I have," Jack confirmed. His story matches Sophia's account perfectly. He was approached when his business was struggling, offered a lifeline that required an advance guarantee payment, and lost everything. But there's something else. Jenkins wasn't the only victim in Queens. We've identified 3 other small business owners who were hit by the same operation within the past year. Robert frowned. Why target a mix of small businesses and a company the size of Thornton Enterprises? That's what bothers me, Jack admitted. The scale doesn't make sense, unless what? Unless Thornton Enterprises was always the main target and the smaller operations were just practice runs, or cover. The implication hung heavy in the air. This wasn't opportunistic fraud. It was a deliberate campaign with Robert's company as the endgame. Sir, Jack continued carefully, I have to ask, have you made any powerful enemies recently? Someone with both the motive and resources to orchestrate something like this? Robert laughed humorlessly. I've spent 30 years in cutthroat corporate America, Jack. I've made more enemies than I can count. Anyone specific come to mind? Someone with a personal vendetta, not just business rivalry? Robert was about to dismiss the question when a memory surfaced, a heated boardroom confrontation from nearly a year ago. The Westlake acquisition. Harold Lancaster, CEO of Lancaster Holdings, had been pursuing the same target. Robert had outmaneuvered him, then publicly humiliated him at the shareholders' meeting. Lancaster, Robert murmured. Harold Lancaster. Jack made a note. I'll look into it. There's something else bothering me, Robert said, shuffling through. The files. The timing. Why now? Thornton Enterprises has been struggling for 5 quarters, but we weren't desperate until recently. How did they know exactly when to strike? Inside information, Jack suggested, beyond what Westfield could provide, meaning we have another mole. Robert's expression hardened. I want a full security audit of every executive with access to our financial projections, and I want to know who this silver-haired man is. Jack nodded. Already working on it. In the meantime, what's our play with the board? They're expecting the Hemsworth money to save the company. Robert rubbed his temples, feeling the weight of his empire on his shoulders. I'll handle the board first thing tomorrow. I'm calling an emergency session to explain the situation and present alternative financing options. And if there aren't any? Robert's jaw tightened. There are always options, Jack. I built this company from nothing once. I can do it again if necessary. As Jack left, Robert turned to the window, gazing out at the city he had once felt he owned. For the first time in decades, he felt vulnerable, exposed. Not just his company, but people under his protection, Maria and Sophia, were in danger because of him. The thought was surprisingly painful. Morning arrived with harsh clarity. Robert had finally fallen asleep at his desk around 4, only to be awakened by his phone 2 hours later. Thornton, he answered groggily. Sir, it's Elena. I'm sorry to call so early, but the financial news networks are running a story about Thornton Enterprises facing a potential fraud investigation. The stock is down 15% in pre-market trading. Robert was instantly alert. What investigation? That's completely false. The sources are anonymous, sir, but they're claiming evidence of accounting irregularities has been submitted to regulators. The board is demanding an emergency meeting at 9. Tell them I'll be there, Robert said grimly. And Elena, find out which news outlet broke this story first. I want to know who their sources are. He ended the call and quickly showered and changed into a fresh suit. As he knotted his tie, he studied his reflection in the mirror. The face looking back at him was still commanding, but the eyes held something new, uncertainty, and perhaps no trace of fear. By 8:30, Robert was in his office, preparing for battle. Jack arrived with more troubling news. The silver-haired man has been identified, he reported. His name is Victor Reynolds, former financial regulator turned consultant. He specializes in corporate takeovers of distressed assets. Takeovers? Robert frowned. This isn't about simple fraud. They're trying to tank our stock price and regulatory standing to force a sale. Exactly, Jack confirmed. And there's more. Reynolds has worked with Lancaster Holdings on 3 previous acquisitions. The EE pieces were falling into place. Lancaster wants revenge. But he also wants my company at a bargain price. It appears so, and now they're changing tactics. The fake investment scheme failed, so they're moving to Plan B, a public smear campaign and regulatory pressure. Robert's phone buzzed with a text from his executive assistant. The board is assembling, time to face the music. As he gathered his materials, Robert made a quick call to the guest apartment. Maria answered on the second ring. "Ms. Ramirez, how are you and Sophia doing?" "We're fine, Mr. Thornton," Maria replied, though her voice betrayed her anxiety. "The security people have been very kind." "Good. I need to attend a board meeting, but Jack Donovan will be checking on you personally. Don't hesitate to ask for anything you need." After a brief pause, Maria asked, "Is it true what they're saying on the news about your company?" "No," Robert said firmly. "It's part of the same scheme. Don't worry, I'll handle it." "Be careful, Mr. Thornton. These people, they're willing to hurt a child. They won't hesitate to hurt you." The concern in her voice caught him off guard. Few people in his life had ever expressed genuine worry for his well-being. "I will," he promised. "And Maria, thank you." The boardroom on the 86th floor was tense when Robert arrived. 12 stern faces turned to him as he entered, their expressions ranging from concern to outright hostility. Thornton, Wallace Chamberlain, the lead director, began without preamble. "What the hell is going on? First the Hemsworth financing. Falls through without explanation, and now these fraud allegations." Robert took his seat at the head of the table, outwardly projecting the confidence that had become his trademark. "The Hemsworth deal was a sophisticated fraud attempt," he stated calmly. "As for the allegations in the press, they're fabricated, part of a coordinated attack on Thornton Enterprises." Skeptical murmurs circulated around the table. "A coordinated attack?" Chamberlain repeated incredulously. "That sounds paranoid, Bobby." "Nevertheless, it's the truth." Robert outlined what they had discovered about Mercer Westfield and the connection to Harold Lancaster. As he spoke, some of the hostility in the room began to fade, replaced by concern. "If what you're saying is true," Chamberlain said when Robert finished, "we need to fight back immediately. A public statement denying the allegations for starters." "I've already prepared one," Robert replied, distributing copies of a draft press release. "But a statement alone won't solve our liquidity problem. We need alternate financing. Fast." "What do you propose?" asked Janet Chen, the board's financial expert. Robert took a deep breath. "I'm prepared to pledge my personal assets as collateral for a bridge loan. My stake in the company, my real estate holdings, everything." Stunned silence followed this announcement. Robert Thornton was known for many things, but personal financial sacrifice had never been one of them. "You'd risk your personal fortune?" Chamberlain asked, clearly shocked. "I built this company," Robert said simply. "I won't let it fall to corporate raiders and fraudsters." The meeting continued for another hour, hammering out details and contingencies. When it concluded, the board had unanimously approved Robert's plan and issued a strong statement of support. As Robert returned to his office, he felt strangely liberated. For years, he had measured his worth by the size of his bank accounts and the scope of his influence. Now, facing the potential loss of everything, he found himself focused on something else entirely, protecting his company and the people who depended on it, including an 8-year-old girl who had somehow seen what he and his high-priced security team had missed. His phone rang, Jack Donovan's number. "Jack, what's happening?" "Sir," Jack's voice was urgent. "We have a situation. A team claiming to be financial regulators just entered the building with a search warrant. But something's off. Their credentials don't check out with our government contacts." Robert's blood ran cold. "Where are they headed?" "The executive floor, and sir, 2 of them are heading toward the residential tower, toward Maria and Sophia." "Lock down the residential floors," Robert ordered. "No one gets in without my direct authorization. I'm on my way." Chapter 4. The Escape. Robert sprinted through the executive corridor, ignoring the startled looks from employees. The normally composed CEO with his measured stride was nowhere to be seen, replaced by a man racing against time. He stabbed the elevator button repeatedly, muttering curses under his breath when the car didn't immediately appear. Finally abandoning patience, he pushed through the door to the emergency stairs and began climbing toward the residential floors. His phone buzzed with a text from Jack. Residential access locked down. 2 security officers confronting the fake regulators now. ETA on police response, 8 minutes. 8 minutes could be an eternity. Robert's lungs burned as he reached the 89th floor, one below the guest apartment. He paused only long enough to catch his breath before continuing upward. As he pushed through the stairwell door onto the 90th floor, he nearly collided with Jack Donovan. "Sir," Jack said urgently, "we need to move now. Maria and Sophia. Safe for the moment. My team is holding the elevator lobby, but these guys brought backup. They've got someone on the building security staff. The residential override codes have been compromised." A distant shout echoed down the corridor, followed by the sound of a scuffle. "This way," Jack urged, leading Robert down a service hallway. "We need to get them out of the building." They reached the guest apartment, where 2 Thornton security officers stood guard, weapons drawn. Inside, Maria was hurriedly packing a small bag, while Sophia stood nearby, clutching her backpack, her eyes wide but remarkably steady. "Mr. Thornton," Sophia said with an eerie calm that belied her age, "the bad men found us, didn't they?" Robert knelt to her level, something he couldn't remember ever doing with a child before. "Yes, but we're not going to let them get to you. Jack here is going to take us somewhere safe." "What about Mom's job? And my school?" "Don't worry about any of that right now," Robert assured her. "We'll sort everything out once we're safe." Jack interrupted, his voice tense. "Sir, we need to move, now. The service elevator is clear. We can take it down to the parking garage." Robert nodded and turned to Maria. "Ready?" She squared her shoulders, the same determined expression he'd seen on Sophia's face earlier. "Ready." Their small group moved swiftly through the service corridor, Jack in the lead, Robert bringing up the rear. The service elevator, unlike its luxurious public counterparts, was a bare metal box designed for staff and maintenance workers. As the doors closed, Jack handed earpieces to Robert and Maria. "Stay on comms. If we get separated, head for exit. Point Charlie." He showed Maria a map on his phone, pointing out a secondary exit from the parking garage. "I've got a vehicle waiting, unmarked, with tinted windows," Jack continued. "Once we're clear of the building, we'll head to a secure location off-site." The elevator descended rapidly. Robert found himself watching Sophia, who clutched her mother's hand, but showed none of the panic he would expect from a child in danger. Instead, she seemed focused, observant, taking in every detail of their escape plan. "You're very brave," he told her quietly. Sophia looked up at him. "Mom says being scared is okay, as long as you don't let it stop you from doing what you need to do." Robert glanced at Maria with new respect. "Your mother is a wise woman." The elevator slowed as they approached the parking garage. Jack raised a hand for silence, then tapped his earpiece. "Team 2, status report." After listening for a moment, his expression tightened. "Change of plans. They've got people in the garage." "How many?" Robert asked. "At least 4 positioned, near the exits." "Can we get past them?" Jack considered. "Possibly, but it's too risky with civilians." He nodded toward Maria and Sophia. "Options?" Robert demanded. "The loading dock on the east side. It's a longer route through the building's service areas, but should be less monitored." The elevator doors opened to the parking level, and Jack cautiously checked the immediate area before motioning them forward. Instead of heading toward the main parking area, he led them through a maze of maintenance corridors, past mechanical rooms and storage areas rarely seen by anyone outside the building staff. "Mom, it's like the secret passages in my adventure." "Books," Sophia whispered, her fear momentarily eclipsed by the excitement of exploration. Maria managed a tense smile. "Stay close, Mija." They passed a break room where a startled janitor looked up from his lunch. Jack flashed his security badge, putting a finger to his lips. The man nodded in understanding and returned to his sandwich, clearly deciding that whatever was happening was above his pay grade. After what seemed like an eternity of twisting corridors, they reached a large open area filled with loading docks. Trucks were parked at several bays, workers unloading supplies for the tower's restaurants and shops. Jack scanned the area, then pointed to a small door near the far corner. That leads to the street. My car is parked a block east. As they moved toward the exit, Robert's phone buzzed. The caller ID showed Elena his assistant. "Thornton," he answered quietly. "Mr. Thornton, where are you?" Eleanor sounded frantic. "The regulators are demanding to speak with you immediately. They're threatening to seal the executive offices." "They're not regulators, Elena. They're fraudsters. Call building security and tell them to verify credentials. With the SEC directly, not through the visitor's documentation. Sir, there's more. I just received a notification from HR. You've been temporarily suspended as CEO by emergency board action, effective immediately." Robert stopped in his tracks. "What? The board just gave me their full support an hour ago." "They're claiming—" "New evidence has emerged." Mr. Chamberlain signed the order. A cold realization washed over Robert. The attack was more extensive than he'd imagined. They hadn't just infiltrated his building, they'd managed to turn his board against him. "Elena, listen carefully. Contact Janet Chen on the board. Tell her what's happening and that I'll reach out when I can. Don't trust anyone else, not even Chamberlain." He ended the call and turned to Jack. "They've suspended me as CEO. We're dealing with something bigger." "So then we thought." Jack nodded grimly. "All the more reason to get clear and regroup. We can't fight what we don't understand. And right now, we're in the dark." They continued toward the exit. Just as they reached the door, a loud voice called out from behind them, "Security, stop right there!" Two men in Thornton Tower security uniforms were approaching rapidly, hands hovering near their holsters. Jack stepped forward, his own credentials displayed. "Donovan, head of executive security. These people are under my protection by direct order of Robert Thornton." The guards exchanged glances. "We have orders from the interim CEO, Mr. Chamberlain. Ms. Ramirez is terminated effective immediately for security violations. She and her daughter need to surrender their access badges and leave the premises immediately." Robert felt Maria stiffen beside him. Fired. Just like that. Jack didn't miss a beat. "That's fine, I'm escorting them out now." The guards looked uncertain. "Mr. Thornton needs to return to the executive floor. Board orders." "I'll escort him back once these civilians are safely off premises," Jack replied smoothly. "Security protocol." The guards hesitated, then seemed to accept this explanation. "Very well, but Mr. Thornton is expected upstairs immediately afterward." As the guards retreated, Jack quickly ushered the group through the exit door and onto a side street adjacent to the tower. The midday sun was blinding after the dim interior corridors. "This way," Jack said, leading them east as promised. True to his word, an unmarked black SUV was parked a block away. Once inside the vehicle, with Jack behind the wheel, Robert finally allowed himself to exhale. Maria sat in the back with Sophia, both looking shell-shocked by the rapid turn of events. "Where are we going?" Maria asked quietly. Jack glanced in the rearview mirror. Secure location in Queens, off the grid, not connected to Thornton Enterprises. "Queens?" Maria looked confused. "Why there?" "Because it's the last place they'll look for a billionaire," Jack replied with a grim smile. "And because we need to talk to your neighbor, Mr. Jenkins." As they navigated through midtown traffic, Robert's mind raced. In the span of 24 hours, he'd gone from being one of the most powerful CEOs in America to a fugitive from his own company. The irony wasn't lost on him. "Jack, what do we know about what's happening at the tower?" he asked. "My team is reporting chaos. The fake regulators are seizing files and electronic devices. HR is processing termination paperwork for both you and Maria. And the board has called an emergency press conference for 3 o'clock. To announce my suspension," Robert concluded bitterly, or most likely, "they'll frame it as cooperation with regulatory authorities while they conduct an internal investigation." Robert turned to look at Maria and Sophia in the back seat. "I'm sorry I've dragged you both into this. You've lost your job because of me." Maria's expression was surprisingly resolute. "Mr. Thornton, these people threatened my daughter. If anyone should apologize, it's me for bringing Sophia to work that day. If she hadn't been there, I'd be ruined by now." Robert pointed out. Or worse. Sophia, who had been quietly observing the adult conversation, suddenly spoke up. "Are we going to our apartment?" Jack shook his head. "Not yet, it's not safe. These people knew where you worked. They might know where you live." Sophia's eyes widened. "My teddy bear is there, and all my books." Maria hugged her daughter close. "We'll get new ones, Mija." "Actually," Jack said, his voice carefully neutral, "we should probably check your apartment. They may have left some evidence there." The implication hung heavily in the air. If these people had already been to Maria's home, they might have left a message, or worse, a trap. Robert made a decision. "As you were. Jack, take us to the apartment first. We'll be quick, but we need to know what we're dealing with." The drive to Queens felt like crossing into another world. The gleaming skyscrapers of Manhattan gave way to a patchwork of neighborhoods, each with its own character. Maria and Sophia lived in a modest brick apartment building on a tree-lined street in Astoria, worlds away from the luxury of Thornton Tower. Jack parked half a block away and surveyed the area carefully before allowing anyone to exit the vehicle. "I'll go in first," he insisted. "Wait for my signal." Robert watched as the security chief approached the building casually, looking for all the world like a normal visitor. After a few minutes, Jack texted, "All clear in the lobby. Come up separately. Apartment 3B." They followed. His instructions, Robert entering the building last. He found Jack, Maria, and Sophia waiting outside apartment 3B, Jack with his hand discreetly near his concealed weapon. Maria unlocked the door with trembling hands. The apartment beyond was small but meticulously kept, with colorful curtains, and walls adorned with Sophia's artwork. Jack entered first, conducting a swift but thorough check of each room. When he emerged from Sophia's bedroom, his expression was grim. "They've been here," he said quietly. Maria gasped. "What did they do?" "Nothing destructive," Jack assured her. "But they left a message." He looked at Sophia. "Your teddy bear has a red ribbon tied around its neck." Sophia's face paled. "Mr. Snuggles? They touched Mr. Snuggles?" Robert felt a surge of anger, unlike anything he'd experienced in his decades of corporate battles, threatening a child's sense of safety, invading her personal space, turning her beloved toy into an instrument of fear. It was unconscionable. "Pack whatever you need," he told Maria, his voice hard with determination. "You're not coming back. Here until this is over." As Maria hurriedly gathered essentials, Robert turned to Jack. "We need a new plan. These people are always one step ahead of us." Jack nodded. "I have a place in mind, a safe house upstate that only my most trusted team members know about. But first, we need information, and Jenkins might be our best source." "Do you think he'll talk to us?" "He'll talk to Maria and Sophia," Jack said confidently. "And once he understands they're in danger from the same people who ruined him, I think he'll tell us everything he knows." Robert glanced toward Sophia's bedroom, where the little girl was carefully packing books and art supplies into her backpack, trying to maintain a brave face despite the violation of her space. "These people have no idea who they're dealing with," Robert said quietly. "I've spent my life crushing competitors who got in my way, but this is different. This is personal now." Jack studied his employer with new interest. "I've worked for you for 10 years, sir, and I've never seen you like this." Robert's gaze remained fixed on Sophia. "Neither have I." Chapter 5. The Plan. Raphael Jenkins' home was a small apartment above what remained of his once thriving scrapyard business. The sign out front, Jenkins Salvage and Recycling, was faded and peeling, much like the man himself. Jenkins answered his door cautiously, chain still in place, until he recognized Maria and Sophia. "Maria, what brings you here with—" His eyes widened as he recognized Robert Thornton, whose face had graced countless business magazines and television interviews. "What the hell?" "We need to talk, Mr. Jenkins," Maria said urgently. "About what happened to your business." "The same. People are after us now. Jenkins studied the unlikely group on his doorstep, then reluctantly removed the chain and stepped back. "You'd better come in." The interior of Jenkins's apartment reflected a life unraveling. Boxes half-packed, sparse furniture, walls with rectangular outlines where pictures once hung. A man in the process of losing everything. "Never thought I'd have Robert Thornton in my living room," Jenkins said with a bitter laugh as they settled in his modest space. "What's next? The president dropping by for coffee?" "Mr. Jenkins," Robert began, "I understand you were the victim of an investment fraud scheme." Jenkins' weathered face hardened. "Victim? Yeah, that's one word for it. Sucker might be another." He turned to Maria. "What's this about? Why are you mixed up with the likes of him?" Maria briefly explained their situation, Sophia overhearing. The fraudsters, the threat against her daughter, their hasty escape from Thornton Tower. As she spoke, Jenkins's hostility gradually transformed into grim understanding. He focused on Sophia with particular concern. "They threatened a child." His voice was quiet but laced with anger. "That crosses a line." "We need to know everything about how they operated," Jack said. "Their methods, their contacts, anything that might help us identify their vulnerabilities." Jenkins sank into a worn armchair, suddenly looking every one of his 60-plus years. "It started when the recycling market crashed. Metal prices plummeted, and I was struggling to keep the doors open. Then this British fella shows up." "Edward Hemsworth," Robert interrupted. "Or Julian Mercer, his real name." Jenkins nodded. "Called himself Hemsworth to me too. Smooth talker. Said he represented European investors looking to expand into American recycling. Promised capital, connections, a whole new start." He laughed bitterly. "I was desperate enough to believe him." "He asked for an advance fee," Jack prompted. "Not at first. That's what makes them so convincing. He spent weeks building trust, took me to fancy dinners, introduced me to other investors. There was an older gentleman, distinguished-looking silver hair. The senior partner, Hemsworth called him. Victor Reynolds, Robert supplied. Never got his real name, Jenkins continued, but he was clearly the boss. The others deferred to him, called him the artist behind his back." "The artist?" Jack repeated. "Yeah, one of Hemsworth's associates let it slip. Said he was called that because he painted his targets so perfectly, learned everything about them, their weaknesses, their pressure points, created the perfect trap for each one." Robert exchanged glances with Jack. This confirmed their suspicions about the level of sophistication they were facing. "How did they finally get your money?" Robert asked. Jenkins's face flushed with embarrassment. "They identified a major client, a manufacturing company looking for recycled materials. Biggest opportunity I'd ever had. But I needed capital to fulfill the order. Hemsworth said his group would provide it, but required a good faith payment to secure the deal. 10% of the investment amount refundable upon contract signing. And the client was fake, Jack guessed. "Everything was fake," Jenkins confirmed. "The client, the contract, even the lawyer who reviewed the documents, all part of their operation." "A lawyer?" Robert leaned forward. "Was his name Thomas Westfield by any chance?" Jenkins shook his head. "No, different guy, but same playbook, I bet. These people have infrastructure, Mr. Thornton. Teams of professionals creating the perfect illusion." Sophia, who had been quietly listening, suddenly spoke up. "Mr. Jenkins, did they leave something in your house too, to scare you?" The older man looked startled by the question, then nodded slowly. "How did you know that?" "They left a red ribbon on my teddy bear," Sophia said simply. "To tell us they could get to us." Jenkins's face darkened. "They left something similar here, a photograph of my daughter in California, taken outside her workplace. I never reported the fraud after that. Couldn't risk them hurting her." Robert felt his stomach twist. These people didn't just steal money, they systematically destroyed lives and silenced their victims through fear. "Mr. Jenkins," Jack said, "did you ever hear them mention other targets, specifically Thornton Enterprises?" Jenkins thought for a moment, not directly. But Hemsworth once made a comment about how I was just the beginning, said something about working their way up the food chain. A practice run, Robert murmured, remembering Jack's earlier theory. They were perfecting their approach before, coming after bigger prey. There's something else, Jenkins added. After I lost everything when I was clearing out the office, I found a small recording device hidden in my desk lamp. They'd been monitoring my calls, my meetings, everything. Jack straightened. Do you still have it? Smashed it, Jenkins admitted. But I remember the brand. High-end stuff, not something an amateur would use. Professional surveillance, Jack noted. These people invest significant resources in their operations. Robert stood and paced the small room, his mind racing. So we're dealing with a sophisticated network of fraudsters who specifically targeted my company, have infiltrated my board of directors, and are now framing me for financial crimes while threatening a child to ensure silence. He shook his head. And I thought hostile takeovers were brutal. What will you do? Jenkins asked. Robert exchanged glances with Jack before responding. Turn the tables. These people think they've cornered us, but they've made a critical mistake. What's that? Maria asked. They've underestimated what I'm willing to do to protect what's mine. Robert's gaze lingered on Maria and Sophia. And who I'm willing to protect. Jenkins studied Robert with newfound respect. The Robert Thornton I've read about in the business pages wouldn't risk his empire for a cleaning lady and her kid. No offense, Maria. None taken, Maria said quietly. I've worked for Mr. Thornton for years. I never expected him to remember my name, let alone protect us. Robert had the grace to look slightly uncomfortable at this assessment of his former self. People change, he said simply. So what's the plan? Jack asked, bringing them back to the matter at hand. Robert's expression became calculating. We need to draw them out, force them to reveal themselves and their entire operation in a way that can't be denied or covered up. Using what as bait? Jenkins asked skeptically. Me, Robert said. They want Thornton Enterprises. To get it, they need to destroy me completely. My reputation, my credibility, my freedom. Right now I'm just suspended. They won't stop until I'm ruined. And how does that help us? Maria asked, concern evident in her voice. Because we're going to give them exactly what they want, under our terms, not theirs. Robert turned to Jack. We need to get to your safe house. We have work to do. 2 hours later, they arrived. At Jack's safe house, a surprisingly comfortable cabin nestled in the woods of the Hudson Valley, about 90 minutes north of the city. Solar panels provided off-grid power, a satellite connection offered secure internet access, and the property was protected by a state-of-the-art security system that Jack himself had designed. No one knows about this place except my most trusted team members, Jack assured them as they settled in. And even they don't know we're here. Inside, the cabin was well equipped with emergency supplies, communications gear, and even a small armory securely locked in a hidden room. You were prepared for something like this? Robert asked, impressed despite himself. Jack shrugged. In my line of work, contingency planning is everything. I've seen too many executives caught unprepared when crises hit. While Maria helped Sophia get settled in one of the bedrooms, Robert and Jack spread maps and diagrams across the dining table, outlining their strategy. The key is to get Reynolds, the artist, to incriminate himself, Jack explained. If we can prove he's behind both the fraud attempt and the false regulatory investigation, your board will have no choice but to reinstate you. And how do we do that? Robert asked. He's clearly careful, professional. Every professional has weak points. His appears to be pride in his work, hence the nickname. We use that against him. Their planning session was interrupted by Robert's phone, one of the few still functioning after Jack had disabled their regular devices to prevent tracking. It's Elena, Robert said, checking the secure messaging app Jack had installed. The board held their press conference. I've been officially suspended pending investigation into financial irregularities, and there's a warrant out for questioning me as a person of interest. They're moving faster than I expected, Jack said grimly. We need to accelerate our timeline. There's more, Robert continued, scrolling through Elena's message. Thomas Westfield has resurfaced. He's working with the board as a cooperating witness, claiming I orchestrated financial fraud and coerced him into participating. Turning the narrative completely around, Jack observed. Classic misdirection. Robert's expression hardened. Westfield is the key. He's the weak link between Reynolds and the board. You think we can flip him? Jack asked. No, but we can use him as bait. Robert outlined his emerging plan, a strategy so audacious that Jack initially thought he was joking. That's incredibly risky, Jack protested. If anything goes wrong... It won't, Robert said with the confidence that had built his empire. Because we'll have something they don't. What's that? Robert nodded toward the bedroom where Sophia was arranging her few belongings. An observer they've underestimated once already, plus whatever evidence Jenkins can provide from the previous scams. As if on cue, Jack's phone buzzed with a message from Jenkins. The older man had agreed to contact other victims of the fraud, ring and collect whatever documentation they still had. It's starting to come together, Jack admitted, but we're still outnumbered and outgunned. My security team is loyal, but they can only do so much against people who've infiltrated your board and have law enforcement connections. Then we need to bring in outside help, Robert decided. Someone with the authority to cut through the deception. He thought for a moment. Janet Chen on my board, she's always been the most independent voice, and she has connections at the Securities and Exchange Commission, the real SEC, not these imposters. Can you trust her? We're about to find out. Robert composed a careful message to Janet, revealing just enough to pique her interest, without exposing their full plan. As night fell, the cabin grew quiet. Maria had prepared a simple dinner from the well-stocked pantry, and Sophia had finally fallen asleep, exhausted by the day's events. Robert stood by the window, gazing out at the darkened forest. In the reflection of the glass, he could see Maria approaching behind him. Mr. Thornton, she said softly, I want to thank you for everything you're doing. He turned to face her. Don't thank me yet. We're still in danger, and you've lost your job because of me. A job can be replaced, she said simply. My daughter's safety cannot. Robert studied her face, the determined set of her jaw, the quiet strength in her eyes. He realized he had never really seen her before, despite her years of service in his building. Why did you stay at Thornton Tower all these years? He asked suddenly. The pay for cleaning staff isn't exceptional. Surely you could have found work closer to home. Maria smiled slightly. The healthcare benefits. Sophia has asthma. The insurance through Thornton Enterprises covers her medications completely. Robert felt a pang of something unfamiliar. Shame, perhaps. He had built a company that provided essential benefits to people like Maria, yet he had never bothered to know their stories. When this is over, he said quietly, things will be different at Thornton Enterprises. If you get your company back, Maria pointed out. When? Robert corrected firmly. When I get it back. Later that night, as Maria and Sophia slept and Jack maintained watch, Robert sat alone at the dining table surrounded by notes and plans. His phone lit up with a response from Janet Chen. Evidence received. Disturbing. Implications. Meeting requested. It was working. The counterattack was beginning to take shape. In the quiet of the cabin, with the weight of responsibility for 3 other lives heavy on his shoulders, Robert Thornton made a silent promise to himself. If, when he emerged from this crisis with his company intact, he would build something better than before. Something worthy of the trust Sophia had placed in him when she'd picked up his phone and changed both their lives forever. Chapter 6. The Confrontation. The abandoned waterfront warehouse had once been part of Thornton Enterprises' real estate portfolio before being sold off during a downsizing effort years earlier. Now its cavernous interior echoed with emptiness, dust motes dancing in the shafts of afternoon sunlight that penetrated the grime-covered windows. Are you sure about this? Jack asked, surveying the space with a professional eye, noting exit points and potential vulnerabilities. Robert nodded, his expression resolute. This is the perfect location, remote enough to ensure privacy, but still within the city limits. And because I once owned it, I know every corner, every access point. 3 days had passed since their escape from Thornton Tower. 3 days of meticulous planning, of gathering evidence and allies, of preparing for this moment. Janet Chen had come through, bringing not only her support but documentation from SEC insiders, confirming that no official investigation of Thornton Enterprises had been authorized. Jenkins had delivered as well, connecting them with 4 other victims of the artist's schemes. Each provided crucial details that, when combined, revealed a clear pattern of sophisticated fraud targeting businesses of increasing size and prominence. "They're in position," Jack reported, checking the feeds from surveillance cameras his team had discreetly installed around the perimeter. "Chen is keeping the real SEC agents on standby 3 blocks away. They'll move only on our signal." Robert straightened his tie, the same power tie he'd worn to countless high-stakes negotiations. "And Maria and Sophia. Secure at the secondary location with my 2 best people. No one knows they're there." Robert nodded, satisfied. Maria had initially resisted being separated from the main operation, but had ultimately agreed when Robert explained the importance of keeping Sophia completely removed from any potential danger. "Westfield took the bait," Robert confirmed. Jack checked his phone. "Surveillance confirms he received your message and made a call immediately afterward, presumably to Reynolds. Our inside source at Thornton Tower reports unusual activity around the executive floor. They're mobilizing." "Good." Robert settled into position behind a makeshift desk they had arranged in the center of the warehouse floor. "Now we wait." The waiting proved to be the hardest part. Minutes stretched into an hour, tension building with each passing moment. Jack maintained a constant check of their security perimeter, while Robert reviewed their evidence and strategy one final time. Their plan hinged on a calculated risk. Robert had sent Thomas Westfield a private message offering to make a deal that would benefit them both. The implication was clear. Robert was willing to surrender, to accept defeat in exchange for certain protections. The perfect opportunity for Reynolds to cement his victory and tie up loose ends. The sound of approaching vehicles broke the silence. Jack tensed, hand moving instinctively toward his concealed weapon. 3 cars, he reported. Black sedan in front, likely Reynolds. SUV behind, probably security. 3rd vehicle is Westfield's Audi. Robert took a deep breath, centering himself. Everything they had worked for came down to the next 30 minutes. The warehouse door creaked open, and Thomas Westfield entered first, his normally impeccable appearance showing signs of strain. His eyes darted nervously around the space before settling on Robert. "Bobby," he began, his voice attempting its usual smooth confidence but falling short. "You've led us on quite a chase." "Hello, Thomas," Robert replied coldly. "I see you brought friends." As if on cue, Victor Reynolds strode in, flanked by 2 men with the unmistakable bearing of private security. In person, the artist was even more impressive than in photographs, tall, distinguished, with silver hair and the confident posture of a man accustomed to power. His tailored suit probably cost more than most people earned in a month. "Mr. Thornton," Reynolds said, his voice cultured and precise. "A pleasure to finally meet in person." His accent was American but refined, suggesting an expensive education. "I wish I could say the same," Robert replied evenly. "But I generally don't. Enjoy meeting people who threaten children and try to steal my company." Reynolds smiled thinly. Direct and undiplomatic, just as advertised. He glanced around the warehouse with mild distaste. "Interesting choice of venue for your surrender." "I have a sentimental attachment to the place," Robert said. "And I wanted neutral ground." "There's nothing neutral about this situation, Mr. Thornton," Reynolds countered smoothly. "You're a fugitive from justice, accused of serious financial crimes. Your board has lost confidence in your leadership. Your reputation is in tatters." He spread his hands in a gesture of mock sympathy. "All that remains is to negotiate the terms of your departure." Robert leaned back in his chair, studying Reynolds with the same calculating gaze he'd used to evaluate countless business adversaries. "Before we discuss terms, I'm curious about something. Why me? Why Thornton Enterprises?" Reynolds seemed pleased by the question, as if he'd been hoping for an opportunity to explain his masterpiece. "You presented the perfect target, Mr. Thornton. A company with valuable assets but declining performance. An aging founder resistant to change. A board growing increasingly nervous. He smiled. And, of course, a certain ruthlessness in your own business practices that made it easy for others to believe you capable of fraud. You've been planning this for a long time, Robert observed. Planning is everything in my line of work, Reynolds replied. I spent 6 months studying you, your company, your weaknesses. The smaller operations, Jenkins and the others, were merely rehearsals, testing and refining our approach. Westfield shifted uncomfortably at this explicit acknowledgement of their scheme. Victor, perhaps we should focus on the matter at hand. Reynolds waved him off. Mr. Thornton appreciates craftsmanship, don't you, even when it's being used against him? I do, Robert admitted. I'm particularly impressed by how you turned my own legal counsel against me. What was the leverage, Thomas? Money? Threats? Westfield flinched but remained silent. A combination, Reynolds answered for him. Thomas had some indiscretions that made him vulnerable. Financial problems resulting from a gambling habit he hid quite successfully from you. He smiled at Westfield with the indulgent air of a teacher toward a mediocre student. Once compromised, he proved quite useful. And the board? Robert pressed. Chamberlain wouldn't turn on me without significant persuasion. Evidence can be very persuasive when properly presented, Reynolds said, especially when delivered by trusted figures like one's own legal counsel. Robert nodded slowly. I underestimated you. That's not something I admit often. Few see the trap until it's sprung, Reynolds replied, clearly enjoying the conversation. Now, about those terms you mentioned in your message to Westfield. Yes, Robert said, leaning forward. I'm prepared to resign permanently as CEO to sell my controlling shares and to issue a public statement taking full responsibility for any financial irregularities, real or imagined. Reynolds raised an eyebrow. Generous, and in return? 3 things. First, all charges and investigations against me are dropped. Second, my personal fortune remains untouched. I walk away a wealthy private citizen. Third, Robert's voice hardened slightly, Maria Ramirez and her daughter are left completely alone. Any threat to them, any harassment, and our deal is void. The cleaning woman and her child? Reynolds seemed genuinely surprised. You're bargaining for their safety? How unexpectedly. Sentimental of you. Do we have a deal? Robert pressed. Reynolds considered for a moment. Your terms are acceptable with one addition. You will provide a complete statement acknowledging your awareness of and participation in Thomas's activities over the past year, exonerating him from any coercion. Westfield looked startled, clearly not having been informed of this condition. Fine, Robert agreed. I'll sign whatever statements you need. Excellent. Reynolds smiled, the expression not reaching his eyes. I must say, I expected more resistance. The legendary Robert Thornton surrendering without a fight. It's almost disappointing. I know when I'm beaten, Robert said simply. A skill many in business never master. Reynolds nodded appreciatively. Indeed. Well then, shall we proceed? With the formalities? Thomas has the necessary documents prepared. Westfield stepped forward, opening his briefcase on the desk and removing several papers. These include your resignation, a transfer of voting rights for your shares, and the statement regarding my actions. As Robert reached for the documents, he asked casually, One last question, if you don't mind. What happens to Thornton Enterprises after I'm gone? Reynolds smiled more genuinely now. It will be broken up naturally. The real estate holdings, the technology division, the energy, interests, all sold to separate buyers I've already identified. The Thornton name will disappear from the corporate landscape within 6 months. Just like Jenkins's scrapyard, Robert noted, and the others. On a much larger scale, of course, Reynolds agreed, but the principle is the same. Extract maximum value from vulnerable assets. Robert picked up a pen poised to sign. And the threats? The intimidation, the red ribbon on a child's teddy bear? Were those strictly necessary? For the first time, Reynolds showed a flicker of genuine emotion, pride. Details matter, Mr. Thornton. Fear is a powerful motivator, especially fear for loved ones. It ensures compliance better than any contract." "I see." Robert set down the pen without signing. "Thank you for that clarification." Reynolds frowned. "Is there a problem?" "Not at all," Robert replied calmly. "I just wanted to make sure we had everything on record." "On record?" Westfield repeated, suddenly alert. "What do you mean?" Robert smiled for the first time since their arrival. "Did you really think I would surrender my life's work without a fight, Thomas? You should know me better than that." Jack stepped forward, producing a small device from his pocket. "This entire conversation has been recorded and is being transmitted to Janet Chen and a team from the actual Securities and Exchange Commission, who are waiting nearby." The color drained from Westfield's face. Reynolds, however, merely looked annoyed. "A recording?" he scoffed. "Inadmissible without consent. In this state, and easily denied." "Perhaps," Robert acknowledged, "but combined with the documentation we've gathered from your other victims, the testimony of my board member Janet Chen about the falsified evidence presented to the board, and—" He paused for effect. "The statement of a certain 8-year-old witness who overheard your associate Hemsworth discussing your plans. It creates a compelling case." Reynolds's composure finally cracked. "A child? You're basing your defense on the word of a cleaning. Woman's brat? That brat has a photographic memory and an eye for detail that spotted your scheme when all my high-priced security experts missed it," Robert said, his voice hardening. "She also took a picture of you and Hemsworth together last week, meeting in the cafe across from Thornton Tower. Quite incriminating when paired with the recording we just made." Westfield began backing toward the door. "This is entrapment. I was coerced into participating in this meeting. Save it for your attorney, Thomas," Robert advised coldly. "You'll need a good one." Reynolds remained outwardly calm, though his eyes had taken on a calculating look. "Impressive countermove, Mr. Thornton, but you've overlooked something. Critical." "What's that?" Reynolds nodded to his security men, who moved their hands inside their jackets. "You're outnumbered." Before they could draw their weapons, the warehouse doors burst open. Janet Chen entered, accompanied by 4 federal agents in tactical gear. "Actually," Janet said crisply, "he's not." The next few minutes were a blur of activity. Reynolds and his men were detained, Westfield crumbled into a sobbing confession, and formal statements were taken. Through it all, Robert maintained the calm, authoritative presence that had defined his business career, though inside he felt a profound sense of relief. When the immediate crisis had passed, Janet approached, him with a grim smile. "The board will convene an emergency session tonight. Your reinstatement should be formalized by morning." "Thank you, Janet," Robert said sincerely. "You took a significant risk." She shrugged. "I never believed you were capable of fraud. Ruthless business tactics, yes. Financial crimes, no." She glanced toward the federal agents escorting Reynolds to their vehicle. "Besides, when you sent me that recording of the threat against a child, there was no choice to make." As the warehouse emptied, Jack received confirmation that Maria and Sophia remained safe at the secondary location. "Should I bring them in?" he asked. Robert considered for a moment, then shook his head. "Not yet. Let's make sure every loose end is tied up first. Reynolds has resources we may not know about." "Agreed," Jack said. "I'll increase their protection. Detail just to be safe." The afternoon sun was setting as they left the warehouse, casting long shadows across the waterfront. Robert paused, looking out over the harbor toward the Manhattan skyline. Somewhere in that forest of skyscrapers stood Thornton Tower, still bearing his name despite the efforts to erase it. "What are you thinking?" Jack asked, joining him. "That I almost lost everything," Robert replied quietly. "Not just my company, but my reputation, my freedom." "But you didn't. Thanks to a little girl who noticed what no one else did," Robert turned to his security chief. "When this is completely over, I want you to establish a college fund for Sophia. Anonymous donor, full ride to any university she chooses when the time comes." Jack smiled slightly. "Not so anonymous if you're telling me about it. I'm telling you as the person who will administer it," Robert clarified. "Maria doesn't need to know where it came from." "She'll figure it out," Jack pointed out. "She's as observant as her daughter." Robert considered this, then nodded. Perhaps she should. Perhaps it's time I became the kind of person who doesn't hide his better actions. As they walked to their vehicle, Robert's phone buzzed with a message from Elena. Board meeting scheduled for 8 p.m. Chamberlain resigned. Effective immediately. Interim leadership awaiting your return. The pieces were falling back into place. His empire would survive, stronger for having weathered this attack. But Robert knew that he himself had changed in ways that couldn't be reversed. The ruthless titan who cared only for profit and power had glimpsed something more valuable. The simple courage of a mother protecting her child, and the clear-eyed wisdom of the child herself. Let's go get Maria and Sophia, he decided suddenly. They should hear the news from us directly. As they drove through the gathering dusk, Robert found himself wondering what Sophia would think of Thornton Tower once she saw it not as a workplace to be feared, but as a second home, a place where her remarkable gifts would be recognized and nurtured. For the first time in years, Robert Thornton was looking forward to a future defined not by what he owned, but by who he might become. Chapter 7. Redemption. 6. Months later, Thornton Tower gleamed in the autumn sunlight, its sleek glass exterior reflecting the clear blue October sky. From the outside, little appeared to have changed. The Thornton logo still crowned the building, employees still streamed through its revolving doors each morning, and Robert Thornton still occupied the corner office on the 87th floor. But inside, everything was different. Robert stood at his office windows, watching the city awaken beneath him. The view remained spectacular, but he no longer saw it as a kingdom to be ruled. Instead, he recognized it as a community, filled with people like Maria and Sophia, whose lives were affected by the decisions he made every day. A knock at his door interrupted his reflections. "Come in," he called, turning from the window. Elena entered, tablet in hand. "Your 9 o'clock is here, Mr. Thornton." "Send them in," Robert replied. "And Elena, I've asked you to call me Robert." She smiled. "Slightly. Old habits, sir. I'll work on it." As Elena left, Maria and Sophia entered the office. Maria wore a smart business suit instead of her former cleaning uniform, while Sophia carried a backpack emblazoned with the logo of her new private school. "Good morning," Robert greeted them warmly. "How was traffic from Queens?" "Not bad with the car service," Maria replied, still seeming slightly uncomfortable with the luxury of having a driver. Sophia finished her math homework on the way. "It was too easy," Sophia complained, though her smile belied her words. "When do I get to start the advanced class?" "Next semester," Maria reminded her. "First, you need to finish the current material." Robert gestured for them to sit at the small conference table near his desk. "How's the foundation work coming along, Maria?" In the aftermath of Reynolds' arrest and the exposure of his fraud network, Robert had established the Thornton Foundation for financial education with Maria as its director. The foundation's mission was to educate small business owners and individuals about financial fraud, using the Reynolds case as its primary teaching example. "We're ready to launch the community workshop series next month," Maria reported, her initial hesitance about the role having evolved into quiet confidence. "Raphael Jenkins has agreed to be our first guest speaker. His testimony is powerful, puts a human face on the statistics." "Excellent," Robert said. "And how many of Reynolds's other victims have we identified?" 23 so far, Maria said. "The FBI task force believes there may be dozens more who never came forward." The criminal case against Victor Reynolds and his associates had expanded dramatically once authorities began unraveling his network. Julian Mercer, aka Edward Hemsworth, had quickly turned state's evidence, revealing operations spanning 3 continents and targeting hundreds of businesses over a decade. Thomas Westfield had followed suit, desperate for leniency. Reynolds himself remained defiant, maintaining his innocence despite overwhelming evidence. His trial was scheduled for the following spring, with both Maria and Sophia listed as potential witnesses. "And the restitution fund?" Robert asked. "The first disbursements went out last week," Maria confirmed. Jenkins received enough to restart his business. He was emotional. Robert nodded, satisfied. While legal proceedings would eventually determine the full extent of Reynolds' assets to be seized and returned to victims, Robert hadn't waited. He had established a private restitution fund with his own money, ensuring that those harmed by Reynolds' schemes could begin rebuilding their lives immediately. Sophia, who had been unusually quiet, suddenly spoke up. "Mr. Thornton, can I see it now?" Robert smiled. "Of course, that's why you're here after all." He led them through his office to a door that previously had connected to a private executive bathroom. The space had been completely renovated, transformed into a bright, colorful room filled with books, art supplies, and a small desk perfectly sized for an 8-year-old. "Your own space, as promised," Robert said, watching Sophia's eyes widen with delight. "For afternoons when your mother is working and you've finished school." Sophia walked slowly around the room, touching everything with wondering fingers. "It's perfect," she breathed. "Look, Mom, there's even a telescope." Indeed, a child-sized astronomical telescope stood by the window, positioned to provide optimal views of the city and sky. "For the observer," Robert said simply, "I thought you might enjoy looking at things from a different perspective." While Sophia explored her new domain, Robert and Maria stepped back into the main office. "This is too much," Maria said quietly. "The foundation position, the school for Sophia, now this." "It's not enough," Robert countered. "Your daughter saved my company, Maria. More importantly, she changed how I see the world." He glanced toward the small room where Sophia was already arranging her books on the shelves. "She showed me that power without compassion is meaningless." "She has that effect on people," Maria acknowledged with a mother's pride. "But still, I worry about her becoming entitled, expecting too much from life." "I think Sophia understands value better than most adults," Robert observed. "She doesn't care about the money or the position. She cares about being seen and heard." Maria nodded slowly. "Yes, that's always been what matters to her." Their conversation was interrupted by Eleanor via the intercom. "Mr. Thornton, the board members are assembling in the main conference room. Quarterly meeting begins in 15 minutes. "Thank you, Elena. I'll be right there." Robert turned back to Maria. "Will you join us? The foundation report is on the agenda." Maria hesitated. "I'm still not comfortable in those settings, all those executives." "Who work for the same company you do," Robert reminded her gently. "Your perspective matters, Maria. That's something else Sophia taught me." After a moment, Maria nodded. "All right, let me get Sophia settled first." As Maria stepped into the small study, Robert returned to his desk to gather his materials for the board meeting. His eye caught on a framed photograph that hadn't been there 6 months earlier. A simple snapshot of himself, Maria, Sophia, Jack, and Raphael Jenkins, taken at the foundation's opening ceremony. Not his usual style of office decoration, but a reminder of the unlikely alliance that had changed everything. The quarterly board meeting proceeded smoothly. Under Janet Chen's leadership as the new chairperson, the board had been restructured with greater transparency and stronger ethics guidelines. Thornton Enterprises was rebounding financially, its stock price recovering as investor confidence returned. When Maria presented the foundation's report, Robert observed with satisfaction how the board members, once among the most cutthroat executives in New York, listened attentively to the former cleaning staff member. Her insights into how financial predators targeted vulnerable businesses proved valuable, not just for the Foundation's educational mission, but for the company's own security protocols. After the meeting, Robert found himself with an unexpected free hour before his next appointment. Instead of catching up on emails or financial reports, he made his way to Sophia's study. He found her at the telescope, making careful notes in a small journal. "What are you observing?" he asked, genuinely curious. Sophia looked up with a smile. "Patterns. See how people move on the streets. It's like watching ants in an ant farm, except they're following invisible rules they created themselves." Robert joined her at the window, seeing the city through her eyes, not as real estate values and corporate headquarters, but as a living organism with its own rhythms and logic. "What have you discovered?" he asked. that most people don't. Look up, Sophia replied simply. They miss so much. Robert laughed, a genuine sound that would have shocked his employees 6 months earlier. A profound observation. Sophia returned to her notebook, adding another line to her increasingly complex diagram of pedestrian movements. Robert watched her work, struck by the focused intelligence in her young face. Sophia, he said after a moment, I never properly thanked you. She looked up, puzzled. For what? For saving my company, for seeing what no one else saw. Sophia considered this. Mom says I just did what was right. That shouldn't need thanks. Your mother is wise, Robert acknowledged. But still, I'm grateful. Sophia nodded solemnly. You're welcome, Mr. Thornton. Then, with the directness only children can manage, she added, Are you lonely? The question caught him completely off guard. What makes you ask that? You have this big office and this big company, but you don't have pictures of family on your desk, just business awards, and you work late even when you don't have to. Robert found himself speechless for a moment. In all his years of business negotiations, no one had ever cut so directly to the heart of his personal life. I suppose I am, he admitted finally. I've been so focused on building my company that I neglected to build much else. Sophia nodded, as if this confirmed a theory. That's what I thought. You should come to dinner at our apartment. Mom makes the best enchiladas on Fridays. Does she? Robert said, amused and touched by the invitation. Yes, and afterward we could show you the stars from our roof. You can see more of them from Queens than from here. I'd like that, Robert said, surprising himself with his sincerity. If your mother agrees, of course. Later that afternoon, as Robert prepared for his final meeting of the day, he received an unexpected visitor. Jack Donovan entered without his usual security report in hand. Jack, Robert greeted him. What brings you up here? No new security concerns, I hope. No, sir, Jack replied. Actually, I'm here to give you my notice. Robert's eyebrows rose in surprise. You're resigning after 10 years. Jack nodded. I've accepted a position with the FBI's Financial Crimes Division. They were impressed with my work on the Reynolds case and offered me a chance to tackle similar operations on a national scale. I see, Robert said, feeling a genuine sense of loss. Jack had proven himself not just an excellent security chief, but a true ally. They're lucky to have you. Thank you, sir. It wasn't an easy decision. When will you leave? End of a month. I wanted to give you time to find a suitable replacement. Robert stood and extended his hand. I won't try to change your mind. This is clearly important to you. Jack shook the offered hand. There's something else you should know. I've recommended Maria for a position on the corporate security team. Maria, Robert repeated, surprised. She has no security background. No, formal training, Jack agreed. But she has exceptional judgment and an instinct for identifying threats that can't be taught. The Reynolds case proved that. With some professional development, she could be an asset to the team. Robert considered. This unexpected suggestion. What position did you have in mind? Threat assessment analyst. She'd work with the security team to identify potential fraud and social engineering attempts against the company. Her perspective as someone from outside the corporate bubble would be valuable. Have you mentioned this to her? Jack shook his head. I wanted your approval first. Robert thought about Maria, her quiet competence, her protective instincts, her ability to raise a daughter like Sophia while working multiple jobs. Make the offer, he decided, but make it clear that it's based on her abilities, not charity or obligation. Of course, Jack agreed. She wouldn't accept it otherwise. After Jack left, Robert sat at his desk, contemplating how much had changed in 6 months. His company had survived a sophisticated attack. His reputation had weathered a serious challenge, but the most significant transformations had been internal. The intercom buzzed. Mr. Thornton, Elena said, there's a call for you on line 2. It's another business owner who believes they may have been targeted by Reynolds' network. Put them through, Robert replied immediately. As he picked up the phone, his eye caught on Sophia's empty study next door. A colourful drawing was taped to the wall, a child's rendition of Thornton Tower, but with something Robert had never envisioned: a garden on the roof, people gathered there, enjoying the view together rather than alone. "Thornton," he answered, his voice carrying a warmth that would have been unimaginable 6 months earlier. "How can I help you?" On a rainy Friday evening 2 weeks later, Robert found himself in a modest apartment in Queens, seated at Maria's kitchen table with Sophia, explaining the constellations they would look for once the clouds cleared. The promised enchiladas had indeed been exceptional. As Maria poured coffee for the adults and hot chocolate for Sophia, Robert's phone buzzed with a message from Janet Chen. Board approved the new corporate governance structure unanimously. Stakeholder model officially replacing shareholder primacy. Congratulations. It was the culmination of the most significant change Robert had implemented since reclaiming his position, restructuring Thornton Enterprises to balance profit with social responsibility, employee welfare, and community impact. The kind of corporate philosophy he would have dismissed as naive idealism a year earlier. "Good news?" Maria asked, noticing his smile. "Very good news," Robert confirmed, putting his phone away. "The board approved the new governance model." Maria nodded appreciatively. "The one that puts people before profits." "That recognizes they're interconnected," Robert corrected gently. "Sustainable profit comes from valuing people, employees, customers, communities." "A lesson from Reynolds," Maria suggested. Robert shook his head. "A lesson from you and Sophia. Reynolds showed me what happens when business becomes predatory. You showed me what happens when people truly see and value each other." Sophia, who had been arranging her star charts on the table, looked up. "Is that why you're making the education center at Mr. Jenkins's scrapyard?" "Partly," Robert acknowledged. "The renovation of Jenkins Salvage and Recycling into a combined business and education center had been the foundation's first major project, and partly because everyone deserves a second chance." "Like Mr. Westfield?" Sophia asked innocently. Robert and Maria exchanged glances. Thomas Westfield had received a reduced sentence in exchange for his testimony against Reynolds, but his legal career was over. "Some second chances have to be earned," Robert said carefully, "and sometimes trust once broken can't be fully restored." Sophia considered this with her characteristic seriousness. "But you're different now, and people still trust you." "I made mistakes," Robert acknowledged, "but I never betrayed those who depended on me. There's a difference." The rain continued to patter against the windows as they talked, the cozy apartment a world away from Robert's penthouse or executive office. Yet somehow he felt more at ease here than in either of those spaces designed to showcase his power and success. When Sophia finally went to bed, Robert helped Maria clear the table, an activity he couldn't remember doing in decades. "Thank you for dinner," he said. "Sophia was right about the enchiladas." Maria smiled. "My mother's recipe. She'd be amazed to know I made them for Robert Thornton." "Just Robert," he reminded her, "at least outside the office." As he prepared to leave, the rain finally stopped. Maria led him up to the roof, where a small garden of potted plants surrounded a pair of weathered chairs. "Sophia's observatory," Maria explained, gesturing to a simple tripod where the girl set up her beginner's telescope. "The view isn't Thornton Tower, but on clear nights you can see more stars." They stood side by side looking up at the clearing sky, where the first stars were beginning to appear between retreating clouds. "Jack told me about the security position," Maria said after a comfortable silence. "It's a generous offer." "It's a practical one," Robert countered. "You have insights we need. The salary and benefits are standard for the role." "I'm considering it," she admitted, "but I want to be sure it's not special treatment." "It's not charity, if that's what you're asking," Robert assured her. "In fact, it's entirely self-interested on my part. I need people who see things differently than I do." Maria nodded slowly. Sophia likes her new school. For the first time, she's being challenged instead of bored. That matters more to me than any job title. "She's extraordinary," Robert said simply. "Yes," Maria agreed, "she is." Another comfortable silence fell between them as more stars emerged. Robert found himself thinking about the unlikely journey that had brought him to this rooftop in Queens, how a child's perception had not only saved his company, but had fundamentally changed his understanding of what that company should be. "I should go," he said eventually. "Early meeting tomorrow." "Saturday?" Maria asked, surprised. "The Foundation's Youth Program Planning Committee," Robert explained. "Sophia's idea for student fraud spotters in schools has gained traction." Maria smiled. "She'll be thrilled." As Robert turned to leave, Maria spoke again. "You know, she was right about one more thing." "What's that?" "You were lonely," Maria said simply, "but I don't think you are anymore." Robert considered this observation with the same seriousness he would give to a major business analysis. "No," he agreed finally, "I don't think I am." 3. Days later, Robert sat in his office reviewing the quarterly financials. Thornton Enterprises was not only recovering, but thriving under its new business model. The foundation was gaining national recognition for its innovative approach to financial education. And Robert himself had discovered something he'd never expected, that true power came not from control, but from connection. A soft knock interrupted his thoughts. Sophia stood in the doorway of her study, holding a drawing. "I made something for your desk," she announced. "Since you don't have any personal pictures." She presented him with a carefully rendered portrait of their unlikely family, Robert, Maria, Sophia, Jack, Jenkins, and even Elena standing together in front of Thornton Tower. At the bottom, in careful lettering, she had written, "People who see each other." Robert studied the drawing, touched by its simple truth. "It's perfect," he said, placing it in a prominent position on his desk. "Thank you, Sophia." She beamed at him. "Now when people come in, they'll know what really matters to you." As she returned to her study, Robert realized she was right. The drawing said more about who he had become than all the business awards and financial statements ever could. His phone buzzed with a message from Maria. "Security orientation complete. Starting analyst training next week. Thank you for the opportunity." Robert smiled, thinking of the once invisible cleaning woman who now sat in high-level security briefings, her insights valued and her voice heard. He typed a quick reply. "The opportunity is ours. Thornton Enterprises is stronger with you on the team." Outside his